till you no longer know who you really are. And at night, when no one's watching, a quiet question rises within. Who am I really? This isn't a question born of logic. It's a calling from the soul. A hidden part of you is patiently waiting for your return. Carl Jung called this the journey toward the self, the true, original you, untouched and unshaped by society. But to return, you must first find the courage to remove the mask and face the darkness you've buried for far too long. You don't have to keep living like a character in a script. You weren't born just to be agreeable. You were born to become yourself. Even if no one has ever seen that version before, if anything I said stung a little, it wasn't an accident. That pain is the signal, the beginning of a journey. And if you're ready, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and walk with me on the path to rediscover your true soul. Persona, the mask molded by fear. From a very young age, you were taught how to be a good person, obedient, polite, never upsetting anyone. You learned to hide your real emotions just to earn a nod of approval from the adults. You were once scolded for being too curious, so you learned to stay quiet. You were once mocked for being too sensitive, so you learned to hide your tears. You were once punished for getting angry, so you learned to suppress the storm within you. And little by little, you created a mask, a version of you, sweet, agreeable, easy to manage. Carl Jung called that mask the persona. It's the social face you wear every day, the role you've played so many times. Even you started to believe it was real. It's the version of you the world accepts. But it is not who you are. And the danger is, if you wear the mask too long, you forget who you were before it. You become successful in the eyes of others, but feel hollow in your own heart. You learn to please everyone except yourself. You smile on cue, say all the right words, but when you're alone, you can't even feel life moving through you. You're not happy, not sad, not angry. You're just existing, like a ghost that nods on command. Jung warned the persona can help you fit in, but it will never make you feel whole. It brings acceptance, but never liberation. You start to feel an inner conflict, a vague but persistent sensation, I have everything, so why do I still feel empty? That's because you're living a role. And the script wasn't written by you. How many times have you pretended to agree, just to avoid being judged? How many times have you faked a polite laugh, when all you wanted was to leave the room each time that happened? You weren't just betraying your true feelings, you were slowly abandoning yourself. And one day, the mask stops being a tool and becomes a prison. A prison you locked yourself in and forgot the way out. Even worse, you start judging others through the lens of your own mask. The successful are admirable. The kind are always agreeable. The angry are just out of control. But you never realize the angry one might simply be in pain. The quiet one might be fighting an inner war. The imperfect one might be the most authentic. So how do you remove the mask? Carl Jung never told you to throw away your persona. He simply warned, don't let it replace you. Know that it's just one part, not the whole of who you are. You still need the persona to navigate the world. But behind it, you must protect a space that belongs only to you, where you can speak the truth. Rest and breathe with your true self. only when you recognize, this is the mask. It is not me. Can you begin the journey back to yourself? And that is when the real journey begins, in the next part. Well, step into the shadow, the dark side within you, where not only pain is hidden, but also the strength you've long forgotten. Shadow the side you once rejected. If the persona is the mask you wear to be accepted, then the shadow is everything you once buried just so you wouldn't be rejected. It's where you hide the emotions you're afraid to show, the thoughts you once labeled as bad, the desires that were condemned, the fears never named. It is the part of you that got left behind in your attempt to become a likable person. Carl Jung called the shadow the soul's darkness, not because it's evil, but because it has never been seen in the light of understanding. When you get angry for no reason, when you feel jealous without knowing why, when you overreact to a small criticism, it's not because you're weak, it's because your shadow is speaking to you. You've buried it for too long. It never disappeared. It's just been waiting for a chance to rise. Because what you refuse to look at will return to control you from the dark. You were taught that anger is wrong, so you suppressed it until you lost your ability to assert yourself. You were called too sensitive, so you smiled politely when you really needed to cry. You were labeled selfish for putting yourself first, so you learned how to please everyone except yourself. All those parts, repressed, dust-covered, locked in a sealed room, are now influencing you in ways you don't even realize. The shadow is not just pain. It is abandoned potential. It is creativity that was never allowed to live. It is courage, strength, and intuition, all swapped out for being appropriate. You cannot become whole without facing it. No one can live authentically while still being afraid of their own self. Carl Jung said one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So how do you face your shadow? Not by trying to eliminate it. You don't need to destroy the darkness within you. You only need to listen. Listen to the voice behind every burst of anger. Listen to the fear behind every rejection. Listen to the child who was left behind every time you feel unworthy of love. You begin rewriting your relationship with yourself, not to be good, but to be real, not to be acceptable, but to be authentic. The shadow is the part you once saw as the problem, but in truth, it holds the key to freeing your truest self. You'll no longer be controlled by emotions left unresolved. You'll stop being surprised when your actions contradict your intentions. You'll begin to understand why certain relationships always end the same way, why some wounds never truly heal. It all begins inside you. And when you start making peace with your shadow, you are no longer its victim. You become the one who chooses. You stop living in reaction. You start living in awareness, and you begin to access a rare state in modern life, true inner peace. In the next part, we'll step into the heart of Carl Jung's journey, the self, the integrated I, where you are no longer divided between mask and shadow, but begin to live as a single, undivided soul. Not perfect, but whole. The self, the whole you, no longer divided. Beneath the mask you wear to survive, beneath the shadow you once rejected, there's something deeper waiting for you to return. Carl Jung called it the self, the whole, integrated I. where the persona and the shadow no longer fight each other but become reconciled pieces of the same truth. The self is not the ideal version of you you're trying so hard to become. It's not the final goal of self-help. It's not the image of strong. Happy. I know everything. The self is simply this you when you no longer hide. It's the union of light and darkness, of the parts you're proud of, and the parts you once felt ashamed of what you're willing to show, and what you buried like a secret. The self doesn't appear overnight. It won't show up because you read a few books or listen to a few powerful videos. It is the outcome of a journey, a difficult journey, not to become better, but to come back to yourself without lies. You'll have to walk through illusions, through the identities others projected onto you, through the beliefs you held about yourself but never truly questioned. And then one day, you'll realize many of the decisions in your life weren't really yours. You chose that career because your parents couldn't. You chased status because you once felt belittled. You longed for love because you were once abandoned. They all had reasons, but they weren't always your reasons. When you start asking, am I choosing this for me? Or because I'm afraid to be left behind? That's when the self begins to appear. It doesn't shine. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need to prove anything to the world. It only needs you to listen. And when you begin living from that place, everything starts to shift. You no longer make decisions to please others. You no longer live to be correct, but to be honest. You no longer say yes out of fear, but say no out of respect for yourself. The self is not perfection. It is inner reconciliation. It's when you can look at yourself with all your contradictions, wounds, and mistakes, and still say, this is me, and I still deserve to live fully. Jung believed the goal of life is not happiness, but wholeness. When you live from the self, you begin to see life with new eyes. Small things become meaningful. Relationships become more genuine. You stop repeating old patterns. Because now, you live with awareness, no longer unconsciously controlled by your past. And the most beautiful part? You feel peace, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer have to pretend. In the next part, we'll enter one of the most powerful warnings Carl Jung ever gave. What happens when you refuse this journey? What happens to the souls that never return to themselves? Stay with me, because the cost of running from yourself is always greater than you imagine. The self, the whole you, no longer divided. Beneath the mask you wear to survive, beneath the shadow you once rejected, there is still something deeper, waiting for you to come home. Carl Jung called it the self, the whole and unified self, where the persona and the shadow are no longer in conflict but become reconciled pieces of a greater whole. The self is not the ideal version of you that you're striving to become. It's not the ultimate goal of self-help. It's not the image of strong. Happy. I figured it all out. The self is simply this you. When you no longer hide, it is the integration of light and shadow, of the parts you're proud of, and the parts you once felt ashamed of what you boldly show the world, and what you've kept buried like a secret. The self does not appear in a single night. It won't reveal itself just because you read a few books or listen to a few insightful videos. It is the result of a journey, a challenging one, not to become better, but to come back to yourself, in a way that is no longer a performance. You must walk through illusions, through the identities others have imposed on you, through all the things you believed were you, but never truly questioned. And then you begin to realize many of the decisions in your life were never really yours. You chose that career because your parents couldn't. You chased prestige because you once felt belittled. You longed for love because you were once abandoned. Each of those had its reasons, but they weren't always your own. And when you finally ask, am I choosing this for me? Or because I'm afraid to be left behind, that's when the self begins to emerge. It's not flashy. It's not in a rush. It doesn't need to prove anything to the world. It only needs you to have the courage to listen. And when you begin to live from that place, everything starts to shift. You no longer make choices to please others. You no longer live to be correct, but to be honest. You stop saying yes out of fear and start saying no out of self-respect. The self is not perfection. It is inner reconciliation. It's when you can look at yourself with all the contradictions, wounds, and mistakes, and still say, this is me, and I still deserve to live a full life. Jung believed the goal of life is not happiness, but wholeness. When you begin to live from the self, you see life through new eyes. The little things begin to matter. Relationships become more honest, more real. You stop repeating old cycles because now you live with awareness. No longer unconsciously manipulated by your past, and the most beautiful part, you feel peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer have to pretend. In the next part, we'll enter one of the most important warnings Carl Jung ever gave. What happens when you refuse this journey? What becomes of the souls that never return to themselves? Stay with me, because the cost of running from yourself is always greater than you think. The cost of running from yourself. Here's the truth. Not everyone is ready for the journey back to themselves, because that journey doesn't begin with light. It begins in darkness. There's no map, no clear destination, only a small voice, echoing from deep within. A voice most of us have learned to ignore. Carl Jung understood this more than anyone. He wasn't just a psychoanalyst. He was someone who ventured into the very depths of the human shadow and came back with a truth that's hard to swallow. Those who do not face themselves will be ruled by their own darkness. And that is the price of rejecting the path of individuation. You see, society never teaches you to become yourself. It teaches you to become manageable, predictable, and acceptable. You have to be okay, be positive, be successful, live correctly. And if you feel empty inside, don't say it out loud. Just keep smiling. You think that safety, that if you don't disturb the darkness, it'll leave you alone. But darkness does not stay silent forever. It finds a way to speak through nameless anxiety, through depression, through sleepless nights, through exhaustion that makes no sense. It speaks every time you fake a laugh in a hollow conversation, every time you say yes while your gut screams no, every time you feel like you have it all, but nothing feels like it belongs to you. You start dying silently. No one notices. You still go to work, still take photos, still post inspirational quotes, but inside there's a desert. You can't feel anything clearly. Joy becomes dull, sadness becomes vague, love turns into duty, work becomes addiction. and life becomes a meaningless loop. Carl Jung called this the unconscious life, when you no longer know who you are, what you want, or why you even wake up in the morning. You just react, chase, perform, hoping that something out there will finally make you feel enough. But what you're missing is not out there. It's the inner fracture between who you pretend to be and who your soul really is. That fracture doesn't scream. It erodes you silently, stealing your passion, your connection, your sense of purpose. You become unstable, reactive, sensitive to everything. You feel lost, like you belong nowhere. And then you start to blame your job, your partner, your parents, your childhood, society, or worse, you turn the blame inward. Something's wrong with me. I'm not enough. You'll never be truly happy. But here's the truth. You're not broken. You've just been away from yourself for too long. You've learned to live for approval at the cost of your own soul. You've run from your shadow, forgetting that it holds your greatest strength, your creativity, your raw truth. You've let the persona run your entire life, forgetting it's just a mask, not your heart, and you've ignored the self, the only part of you that can lead you to real peace. Carl Jung didn't show you this path to scare you. He just wanted you to understand one thing. Avoiding your inner journey doesn't keep you safe. It just leaves you emptier with every passing day. Many think they can avoid pain by never digging deep, but the truth is, pain doesn't vanish when ignored. It just changes form into anxiety, depression, addiction, bitterness, and that hollow feeling of not being truly alive. You'll repeat the same wrong relationships. You'll make the same draining decisions. You will stay stuck in cycles you don't even understand. Not because you're weak, but because the unhealed shadow is still steering the wheel from the dark. Only when you stop, listen, look, and embrace, do you start to take back control, the control to live, truly live, not like a machine, not like a replica of what society expects, but as a soul with emotion, with shadow, with light, with depth. And when that day comes, you don't need to run anymore. You stand still, look into your own eyes, and say, I'm not perfect, I'm not easy to understand, but I'm real, and I deserve to live as myself. In the final part, well, arrive at the destination of this entire journey, becoming yourself, not perfect, but whole. It's not the end. It's the beginning of a life where you no longer play a role, a life you finally belong to. Becoming yourself, not perfect, but whole. After everything, you don't need to become someone great. You just need to become yourself, not perfect, not all-powerful, not always positive, not always strong, but real. So real that you no longer have to pretend. So real that you can face your own darkness without running. So real that you can smile knowing you're still learning how to live. Carl Jung didn't just teach us to look into our shadow. He taught us something more important. Freedom doesn't come from light, but from the reconciliation between light and shadow within us. Becoming yourself doesn't mean you're always okay. It means you no longer hate the parts of you that are not okay. You stop feeling ashamed of being fragile. You stop forcing yourself to prove you're fine. You begin to understand that it's through the cracks that the light gets in. You realize you don't need to be like anyone else to live fully. You don't need to please the entire world. You just need to be honest with your soul. And from that space, you'll start to love differently. not with fear or dependence or the need to fill your emptiness, but with a love between two souls that have both learned how to stand alone. You'll work differently, not to prove your worth, but to express your truth. You'll stop choosing the right job and instead choose what resonates with your being. You'll live differently. 2. You'll be present. You'll breathe deeper. You'll listen to your body. You'll feel your emotions without judgment. You'll stop running from yourself. And that is the freedom the whole world is searching for when all along it's been inside you. Becoming yourself is not a destination. It's a process, a quiet promise you make each day. I will no longer turn my back on my soul. There will be days you feel strong, and days you feel lost. But in both, you're still you. No roles, no masks, no denial. And when that happens, everything begins to change. Not the world, but the way you see the world. You start to see the person behind the anger. You see the fear behind a harsh word. You see the darkness inside light. And the light inside even your darkest days. You no longer need a perfect world to feel peace. You only need one solid truth. Inside, I am me. And I am walking this path. Honestly, Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And if you've made it this far, if you've had the courage to listen to each part of this journey, know this: you are on your way home, not to a place out there, but to a place within yourself. If you've listened this far, pause, not to rest, but to realize something important. You are no longer the same. No one listens to all of this by accident, not unless a fire has already been lit inside them. A silent call that can no longer be ignored. You've changed, and that change cannot be undone. Now you stand at a crossroads. Either go back to a world that feels safe, but isn't real, or move forward onto a path that very few dare to walk, the path of those who choose to live authentically. Carl Jung never asked you to be a hero. He simply asked, can you look at yourself when no one else is watching? Because true freedom is not found in changing the world. It's found in returning inward and never turning away from your essence again. You don't have to heal every wound. You just have to stop pretending you've never been hurt. You don't have to always know who you are. You just have to stop living as someone the world wants you to be. And if anything in this video has touched you, don't ignore it. Let it open new doors inside you. Leave a sign below, a thought, a feeling, a moment you've lived through. It's not just a comment. It's your way of declaring to yourself, I'm ready. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because the journey of becoming never ends here. It's only just begun, and you deserve someone to walk it with. He'll see you on the other side of truth, where you no longer live to fit in, but to show up. No longer to be perfect, but to be whole.